My name is Giginumbus and welcome to our very first playthrough of the game called Valheim. In this episode, we are going to try and get as far as we possibly can in the first starting days here, and we shall see where this journey leads us to. Day 1 begins as any good story should, with the arrival of a friend and learning the basics of the game, including jumping. From the starting location, we have decided to move on and explore as much of the wilderness as possible, moving ever so deeper into the meadows, exploring as we go along. From here, we end up having our first taste of combat, which doesn't exactly go according to plan, having to run away from the local wildlife. Upon venturing further on, we end up in one of the biggest ravines that we have ever seen, but this also ends up being one of our downfalls. And unfortunately, that downfall was my own, our characters unable to swim properly, and not understanding the mechanics of the game yet, one of us ended up being the guinea pig. This little mishap caused me to start right from the beginning at the starting area again, having to run all the way back to that ravine to gather my equipment once again. It wasn't a lot to begin with, but it was my own. From here, the first night began to fall upon us while we tried to work my way out of the ravine, proving a little bit difficult, but in the end we managed to make our way out. Having escaped the torment of the ravine, Korg has held himself up into a building where we catch up with him in a little bit of time later. From here, we built ourselves a fire and held out for the night, waiting for the dawn of day 2. Day 2 now begins, and our first obstacle of the day is the doorway, but having escaped that, we venture on forth to find out more about our surroundings. Once we have escaped from the roof, we have discovered that the building that we were held up in for the night is quite shabby looking and is in dire need of repairs. After discovering that the location for our building that we have found isn't in the ideal location, we have decided to venture forth north, and through the mist and the fog, we have found what is soon to be our new base of operations. After clearing out the local wildlife, we have decided to repair the building and get any necessary upgrades done to it. This proved rather difficult for us for some reason, as we ended up with a hole in the roof, but over time we ended up learning how to build properly. But going by our current progress, it seems like we have a lot more to be desired in the way of carpentry. After farming a little bit of wood outside, we have decided to build some cooking stations outside on the side of the house. Day 3 begins with us getting poisoned by bees as we run away for our lives. In the middle of the night, all we did was gather some wood and upgrade our base for a small amount of time. After running directly south from our base, we have come across the river which we would be crossing very often in the next few days. After we have crossed the river and after a little bit of light reading, we have discovered that we are severely underleveled for this area of the world and severely damaged. We decided to turn around and head back to base. After heading back that afternoon, we have decided to move on and gather the necessary materials to do some much needed upgrades to ourselves as well as our weapons, taking in these sights along the way. After getting ambushed by a couple of grey dwarves and grey lings, we have discovered that fire actually dispels them and keeps them at bay, a mechanic that we've never really used at any other point other than this one. The next afternoon, we have decided to move back to base as we decided to do some more upgrades, with myself building the wooden shield which will become our staple for very many hours to come. The night of day 4 starts with us cooking some stuff on the fire, as well as the arrival of another friend of ours. So during this time, we end up preparing for the trip down to meet him at the beginning area. Day 5 begins with us waiting for our friend to join at our starting area, as Korg decides to build 2 fireplaces for some strange reason. While waiting for our friend Harvey, we end up with a few work-related incidents and have an IOD in the meantime. Harvey then joins us while I'm exacting my revenge on the log that has almost destroyed me, and he is quite a strange character, this one. If you look closely, you can see him in his natural habitat. Harvey ended up joining us, a hungry little man, and after jumping like a gazelle, we decided to try and feed him. Harvey, still unaware of how to move his body correctly, decides that he's going to end up kicking everything in his path, enemies, trees, as well as hills. Upon heading back that afternoon, we ended up making him a bed, giving us 3 people into one little hut for now. Later that evening, while looking for more materials to upgrade Harvey as well as ourselves, we stumbled upon another building just over the hill from our original base, which was originally going to be a secondary base, but after having built it up in the next coming days, it never panned out to be. Our base further proving that it is in quite a perfect spot. At night, the moon tends to shine right over our building and lighting it up in the evenings. That very same evening, Harvey decides that he wants to try and chop down 2 trees at the same time, which ends up being his very first death in the lands of Valheim. Day 6 begins with Harvey stepping onto a fire, breaking it, setting himself on fire, and almost drowning, all in a matter of seconds. Later on that day, we decide to head into the wilderness once again, heading further north to the area where we would end up fighting the very first boss, just to see what kind of area we are working with. After exploring further still, we ended up at a cabin that it was right next to a river, which we ended up spending some time here. As night rolled in, it brought along with it quite a hard storm with it, and we tried to hold up here for the night, but it wasn't going very well according to plan. Some of us was quite damaged, as well as enemies all around outside. By the beginning of day 7, we had moved along and ended up near the ravine of which I had previously died in day 1. Later on that afternoon, we ended up back at the base, where we ended up noticing that Harvey wasn't wearing his armor for some weird reason, and we spent an unnatural amount of time looking him over. Later the same day, after building a raft, Harvey decided to come in and try and steal it, but unknowingly unable to hotwire it, all it managed to do was lazily move into the ocean. We spent the rest of the day trying to work out on how a raft works, but as you can see, it isn't going exactly according to plan. On our maiden voyage, Harvey at the helm and Korg building a fireplace, trying to send an SOS to anybody that would hopefully see it to save us from this raft. A short way from the rocks, Korg decides that he's going to light his torch one more time to send a last-ditch effort to try and get somebody to notice us before the inevitable happens to us. With the raft now broken, the only option that we have is to swim back to shore and hopefully not let Harvey drive the boat again. At the beginning of day 8, after having done some minor upgrades to the base, we ended up putting a workshop outside as well as a chopping block next to it, in hopes to try and upgrade the workshops without fully understanding how they operate. Ultimately, building an absolutely horrible looking enclosure for our workshop, still having unable to understand the building mechanics of this game up to this point, as it is currently our first full-on building we are trying to do. Later on in that stormy afternoon, we ended up extending the shack a little bit further out, further honing our carpentry skills. Day 9 greets us when we are starting to build a new dock area for our raft, which we still haven't rebuilt from the last catastrophe. Further into day 9, we decided to extend the shack further out towards the sea, and further proving that we are not understanding the structural integrity of our buildings. Later on that afternoon, after extending the shack further out, we decided that the dock needed a bit more attention, so we were going to attend to that. This also features the back to front walls of our shack, which is soon to be changed. That evening we ran around trying to get as much materials as possible to finally build some better armor for ourselves, and day 10 begins with me on fire and building a helmet for myself. We ended up spending a good portion of this day trying to get as much deer hide as we possibly could, but having only spears, you could imagine how well this actually went. This here is actually one of the best hunting experiences that we managed to get, teaming up and getting the deer hide. Upon looking for more deers to hunt, we ended up on top of the mountain. This ended up being the 4th biome that we are supposed to be exploring, so we are subsequently decided to run straight back down. Upon reaching the bottom of the mountain and exploring a little bit further, the game decided to freeze on me, which ended up being my next death of the run. That evening I ran back into the Black Forest to grab as much of my gear as I possibly could. Upon going back to the river where we would normally swim across to go to the Black River, there was quite a few enemies waiting for us across there. Day 11 begins after grabbing all of my equipment, rather stormy outside, and doing a couple more upgrades to our base. The open wall design, looking out to the ocean, ended up sticking around until the remainder of the run. After exploring around for a while, we decided to end the gaming session here for the day. Skipping ahead to the night of day 13, we have decided to try and build up the building on the top of the hill just above our base, just in case we ended up with unexpected visitors. This ended up going fairly well, all things considered, with no issues along the way, the door being built on the opposite end of where it was supposed to be, but regardless, the building was more or less complete, albeit never to be used again, at least up until this point. As day 14 begins, we find ourselves wanting to start preparing to fight the first boss on this day. Once we have been all set up, we decided to run across the river and head up to the boss's spawn area, where we try to defeat him for the very first time. Upon arrival, we decided to sacrifice the necessary items to the boss and get him to spawn so we can fight him. And once he has decided to spawn, we use our newly found equipment that we have developed over the past few days to try and defeat him. The fight was by far the hardest thing we have had to face up to now, but we managed to take him down with just the two of us over time. It was long and grueling, but we have managed it just fine. Once the boss has been taken down, we loot his body to get the antler, which enables us to finally build a mining pick, which we could start going into the Black Forest and getting some more materials. As well as upon defeat, the first boss dropped a trophy which we could mount on top of the stone to give us some extra powers. As of which, I also got scared by the raven landing behind me, which ended up giving us some more information on how to use the boss's powers. That very night, after farming some deer along the way back home, we have decided to build ourselves another raft. Day 15 begins with us accidentally activating our newfound power and trying to do another maiden voyage for our new raft that we have decided to build during the night. This of course does not go according to plan, as it is my first time trying to learn how to commandeer a raft, so we decided to leave it more or less within the docks area. Later on that day, we have decided to go back across the river and head towards the Black Forest area to mine some tin, which we would end up using for more materials further down the line. We returned later that evening after having grabbed as much tin as we could possibly carry, and during the night we decided to build a workbench right next to the dock so we can repair the raft if anything ended up going wrong with it. A few minutes later, day 16 begins, as well as quite a amazing sight. The sun rises above near our base, lighting up the ocean before us, signaling the further expansion of our adventures, as well as almost getting shanked from behind from a greyling. As the day went on, we decided to try and use the raft to go across the river, but we still couldn't work out the controls yet, so we have decided to park it back at the dock and wait until we get the better boat. That late afternoon, once we have decided to go deeper into the Black Forest to try and get some more materials, we have found ourselves a copper deposit, which we decided to try and mine right there and then. But unbeknownst to us, soon as we started mining the copper node, we have gotten ambushed by quite a few grey dwarfs, greylings, as well as this massive monster. Fearing for our lives, as this is the biggest monster that we have faced, besides for the boss, we have decided to try and flee as fast as we can. After spending most of the night trying to escape the troll, Korg has died to it, and me running away from a grey dwarf brute, as well as a neck, succumbed to both of them. Once we spawned back at base, Korg decided to try and run out into the wilderness to look for some food, where he gets ambushed by what seems to be two boars, a couple of greylings, and a few necks. Having seen this, I quickly opened the door and let him in, with him doing some evasive maneuvers. As day 17 rolls around, we still have a couple of grey dwarfs in the area, and we try to use our poorly constructed coverings over our cooking areas. It was originally there to help with the wind and rain, but it ended up hindering us more than anything else, as they simply just popped on and off for no apparent reason, despite being out in the air. Upon trying to head back to our area where we have last died, we see quite a fascinating sight with the sun shining over the river that we usually cross to enter the Black Forest. Sometime later, after grabbing our equipment, we find ourselves deeper into the Black Forest. Heavy into the fighting, we are trying to find a crypt where we can get some of the cores to build the furnaces and the kilns, so we can further upgrade our equipment with metal armors and weapons. After all the fighting, we did find ourselves quite close to a crypt entrance, where we tried to go in, but it seemed to be guarded by a level 2 skeleton. Having seen this, we decided to turn tail and run as far back as we can, ending up right back to the meadows. Despite us heading all the way back to the meadows, the skeletons decided to follow us all the way there, making dry macaroni noises as they fought us. We ended up fighting the skeleton for quite some more time afterwards, with Korg hitting it with his bow, myself with my spear, and afterwards Korg coming to the rescue, taking it out once and for all in a funny burst of bones. After that insane fight, we decided to look at the little cabin that was right next to us when we were fighting, and I put my sharpshooting skills to the test as I take down the beehive, earning myself a queen bee in the process, which would allow us to build a beehive back at the base. That evening, after crossing back over the river, we decided to build a beehive right next door to our one workshop, where this honey will prove to be a valuable ingredient to our daily upkeep. As day 18 begins, we decide to sort out our inventory as much as we can and move along to the ocean to see the sunrise. Sunrises and sunsets in this game are something to behold. If you ever play the game, we suggest that you sit down and look for it yourself. Day 18 was fairly uneventful, so the most significant thing that I ended up doing was taking off the overhangings over the cooking stations so they could actually operate once again. As day 19 begins, we figured that the skeleton guardian that was guarding the crypt entrance is now destroyed, so we should be able to get into the entrance fairly easy. So that is what we have planned for the day, and we prepared to head out. Later, we found ourselves along the entrance of the crypt that we wanted to enter, and we set about destroying the rest of the skeletons guarding the entrance. With the outside enemies destroyed, we decided to head down into the burial chambers, which we come face to face with a 1-star skeleton once again, and looking back, we seem to have gotten very unlucky with these mob spawns. Having said this, we were supposed to be clearing out this burial chamber, but it is taking 2 of us just to take down 1 skeleton in the very first room. After that fight, we realized that we're going to need all the help that we can get, and after putting down a campfire for comfort, I ended up setting Korg alight by mistake. A few minutes later, after clearing some rooms, we have further proven how unlucky we are getting a level 1 rancid skeleton after us. The skeleton proved to be a bit too much for us, and taking down Korg in its wrath. Upon heading back into the chamber while waiting for Korg to get back, I seem to have glitched out the rancid skeleton, allowing me to hit it with my bow without it managing to get to me. After Korg died a second time to the spawner within the burial chambers, I decide to try and destroy it solo while he makes his way back, just so we can have a bit of an easier time as we explore the burial chambers. But despite all of this, we did end up getting some cores while we were in here, but we didn't manage to reveal the next boss's location. We were now finally able to claim our prizes, which was the cores within the burial chambers, so we could finally build the smelter and the charcoal kiln. Usually, or sometimes rather, in these burial chambers there is a indication of where to find the next boss. But unfortunately, in this case, we were unlucky as these rune to depict where the next boss to be located is never managed to spawn here for our first burial chamber. After looting as much as we could within the burial chambers, we emerge victorious, but we spent so much time in there, it is now the day of day 20. Upon exploring further, we have decided to head deeper into the Black Forest, where we found our old friend, the Blue Troll. The fight was a long, grueling one, which took us to the dusk of day 20, where I narrowly missed dying once again. Soon after the troll has taken down Korg once again, I pick up his bow and hit him one last time in the ass, killing him. And that is where we'll end our very first adventure into Valheim. If you have enjoyed the content, give it a like and subscribe for more videos like this one.